John Paul Miller's arraignment was today, and it looked as though he was at court all by his little lonesome. No wife, no parents, no church members to cheer him on and pat him on his head. He walked into the courtroom carrying a Bible and sat down and started reading it. And I think that shows how much John Paul has used his role as a pastor to get out of trouble. And he thinks it's going to work on the federal government. And the reason he thinks that is because one, it's worked for him before, and two, he's a dingling. I have no trouble imagining that my favorite idiot, Reginald Wayne Miller, used the "but I'm a preacher" excuse when John Paul was growing up, so he learned that it's just the way things are done. However, as an adult, he should have realized that it was just a really gross way to try and get out of trouble, and that being a pastor doesn't always give him a get out of jail free card, just when he's pulled over by his buddies in Horry County and flashes them his shiny clergy badge or whatever it was. John Paul pleaded not guilty, and his release agreement stipulated the following. He has to report to the U.S. Probation Office, and even though he isn't on probation, that office handles pretrial release agreements. He has to maintain employment or be actively looking for employment. He has to surrender his passport and can't apply for another one or any other international travel document. He had to get rid of his firearms. He can't use alcohol excessively. He can't possess or use any illegal drugs, and he can be randomly drug tested while awaiting trial. He has to report to his pretrial officer if, or more likely when, he has any interaction with law enforcement, including any traffic violations. So he might as well just go ahead and put that person on speed dial. Pun intended. He will be on an ankle monitor and isn't allowed to leave the state without permission. And he has to pay part or all of the cost of the ankle monitor. There is something very poetic about him being the one being tracked now. There is also a stipulation that he can't go close to any of the victims' or potential witnesses' houses. And if he does, his monitor will alert authorities and his bond could be revoked. So they had discovered that he had already looked up addresses of the witnesses, which I doubt surprises anyone who's followed this case. And John Paul might not overtly intimidate the witnesses himself, but I wouldn't put it past him to do so discreetly and in a completely weaselly way, because he's the weaseliest. And I'm sure he has a minion or two that would do the dirty work for him. And as far as who the other victims are, it could be they were referring to Micah's family. The prosecution proved that John Paul was a flight risk due to the plane that he had gifted to Mark Kaufman, the multiple cars that he owns that are titled to various of his entities, and the tons of cash, silver bars, coins, and baseball cards that were found in his safe when the FBI raided his house in November of 2024. After the arraignment was over, the prosecutors had a short interview with reporters. And when asked if there would be more charges, U.S. Attorney Brian Sterling said the investigation was continuing. What was interesting to me was that his body language might have given away the answer that his mouth didn't. So when the reporter asked the question, Brian's mouth wasn't saying yes, but he was nodding his head. "We see you, Bry Guy, and we are picking up what you're putting down, and then we're dancing around the living room like we aren't worried about breaking a hip." But maybe that's just me. Another interesting bit about the interview with the prosecutors was that when a reporter asked if there was a particular reason the case got picked up on a federal level, Brian and U.S. Assistant Attorney L. Klein, who was the one prosecuting the case, both looked at each other. L gave a cute little smirk, and then Brian said there was no comment and that they were just working with their law enforcement partners. Also, how much do you love that they chose a woman to prosecute John Paul? And not just any woman, but a pretty woman with long dark hair. I'm not saying it was definitely a psychological choice for them to use a woman who looked similar to his first two wives, but I'm sure pretending like it was. The next steps in the case will be pretrial motions and discovery. There was mention that a jury pool would begin in March of this year, but that's probably just notices being sent out to potential jurors. So it might get boring here for the next month or so. Then again, John Paul might do something dumb. But back to that money they found in John Paul's safe. That, along with the prosecutor saying the investigation is ongoing, leads me to think that they are at least still investigating him for financial crimes. I mean, it's a bit weird for a pastor who only has a congregation of about 700 to have tons of money and valuables in a safe. But I also have hope that the reason it got to a federal level was because Micah was murdered across the state line, and that means they're investigating her death as well. or at least are going to charge him with causing her death, even if not directly. The saddest thing I learned today was that federal court does not use live bears as bailiffs. Thank you to all of you who showed up to the courthouse today to support Micah. And special thanks to Guru for being there live so we could learn what was happening as soon as people started exiting the courthouse. Stay tuned for more on the John Paul Miller case, and watch out for a new episode this week on a new case: the murder of Charity Bielis and her 6-year-old twins in Bonanza, Arkansas. Until then, stay safe and be happy.